Thank you. Wow, the mythology begins. That's amazing. Thank you. So, good afternoon. Guten Tag. Guten Tag. Okay, a little louder. Guten Tag. Guten Tag. I'm not saying it right. That's the problem. On behalf of the Los Angeles Urban Rangers, I want to welcome you to the Rachel Carson Refuge. I'm Ranger Jenny. I'm stationed here for about 3 months now. Actually, I've been on furlough for a few weeks, but I just went back to work today. Very, very excited. Before this, I was actually stationed in the Los Angeles River Basin for about 15 years. Where are y'all from? Where are you from? Mexico, Minnesota, Brazil, Philippines. Wow, so we have yeah? Peru. All right, great. Do you know the Manu National Park? I have a mixed relationship with that park. We have people from a wide range globally of different ecosystems. That's really exciting. And are you having a good time in the refuge? Yeah. No? Yeah. What's your name? Eunice. Eunice is having a good time in the refuge. And what wildlife have you seen so far during your stay here? Christoph, yes, okay. Some humans, human wildlife, anything else? A rabbit? Really? That's pretty cool. Okay. We're going to start our campfire program in a few minutes when Jenny comes. But before we do that, there are a few good things to know about your stay in the refuge. Before we get started, the refuge is a 2-story multiple-use area with a wide range of opportunities for writing and reading and theorizing and trailblazing, as well as apparently daily imbibing. It is part of actually the larger LMU ecosystem. The signature species is Homo intellecticus, which you can identify quite easily by the furrowed brow and the abstract vocalizations. Have any of you seen any of these so far during your stay? Yes? No? Maybe? Yes. Okay, some of you have seen them. They're not hard to find. Most of these individuals are migratory. They fly to the refuge from about 3 months to a year at a time, and then they return home. This trip is thousands of miles, this migratory route, and yet it's not unusual for any one individual to do 3 or 4 trips in the course of a lifetime. It's really quite extraordinary. Okay, just a few safety tips for the LA Urban Rangers. Safety is always a priority. We want you to be safe and healthy at the Rachel Carson Refuge. I should say, in general, the refuge is known as a distinctively safe place without hazards such as committees and lecture writing and students who are unhappy with their grades. Tends to be like a refuge, right? Still, the trails around the refuge can be dangerous. This is important. The hiking trails can be very deceptive. I don't know if you've noticed this yet, or if we've lost anyone so far, but it's important to know that the hiking trails are actually for hikers and for 2-wheeled vehicles. The 2-wheeled vehicles will not stop. Apparently, as far as I can tell, no matter what. So you want to be sure to stay on the side that's for the hikers. This can be a little hard to get used to. I'm still getting used to it. It's sort of a miracle I'm still alive, but you can do it. Residents generally will not bother you. They're not terribly aggressive. They can become a little bit more aggressive in the early fall for about 2 weeks. In late September and early October, this is called Wiesen, or the wet season. Also, they can become a little bit testy on the rare occasions when the coffee machine in the watering hole runs dry. Okay, so stay safe, have fun, and enjoy the Rachel Carson Refuge. Okay, I'm going to try to be done in less than a half hour, so we have lots of time for discussion. First of all, I just want to thank the Rachel Carson Center. It's really exciting to be here. I have a number of friends who have come over the years, and they always return with these kind of rapturous reports about what it was like to be here, so now I'm experiencing that myself, and I've been here about a month. It's been really quite wonderful. So the original title, we just get settled here, for this talk was, the original subtitle was actually Accidental Adventures in Tours, Apps, and Art Actions. And what I want to do is talk about these projects in different media, different formats, that to do environmental humanities that I've sort of found myself involved in. I'm going to actually talk about the LA Urban Rangers in the most detail, just so that I'm not skimming the surface for all these projects, and then I'm going to sort of race through a few other projects that I've been involved in, some of which Christophe mentioned. These have ended up being a big part of my career, especially in the last few years, and I would say that they are mostly, my involvement in them is mostly accidental. I've had a very accidental career, starting with my fall out of the palm tree, I suppose. Ranger Jenny was not in my 20-year career plan when I started out, but I sort of stumbled into the Rangers, and I stumbled into some things before that, and I've stumbled into some things after that, all as a consequence of the things that I was writing about. That's a cool thing about being a writer, right, is you have something to write about that leads you to other things. I think all these projects are really heavily informed by my training, my PhD work, my 1,100 years of PhD work, but they've actually been really important. And I really see what I do these days as public humanities and arts. And I'll be very curious to see if you agree and think that that's a good word for them. So my career plan was actually to be a writer. I've actually wanted to do this since I was about 5. And about 2 minutes after I finished my PhD, I went to Los Angeles to do that. And I had actually written my dissertation called Flight Maps intentionally to segue out of academia and into this writing career that I had always wanted. And it turned out that Flight Maps really ended up setting up the rest of what I've done, which is really all about a critique. Really the core of Flight Maps is a critique of this American idea of nature. It's also a Western idea, but like a lot of things, we Americans take it to extremes. That's really historically powerful. It's this idea that nature is out there, it's apart from people, it's actually a refuge from humans and modern life. This is me and my mom still going out to Colorado just last summer, doing the nature thing. Though to say that this idea is a powerful American idea is sort of to say that, you know, the American president is a powerful person. It is arguably the most powerful and deeply rooted cultural assumption that we have. And it's extremely problematic, obviously, which I'm sure you've all been looking at this, that one of the problems is that we really make the nature, by divining natures out there, we make it invisible in our everyday places, so we don't see the nature that's in this table or the computer, and we can't take responsibility for that. So I published Flight Maps. I got a lot of reviews, feedback, some of it, no, I'm going to need lights, sorry. I'm old-fashioned, I have paper up here. Thank you. Is that okay? Can you, oh, you can't see my beautiful mother. Very well. You can cut some of those lights, just leave me these if that's okay. Yeah, that's fine. And, you know, some of it is good, some of it is mixed, some of it was bad. But, you know, I had a lot of nice feedback. And a friend of mine, good friend of mine from graduate school, Michael Goldberg, said, well, you know, this is all fine, this is smart, but, you know, so what? And he was one of my best friends, so I thought, so what? And I think that most of my work in Los Angeles has really been an effort to answer that question, so what? So what if nature's invisible, if you can't see it, and what are you going to do about it? And I've sort of been on a quest, I think, to answer Michael's question. So this is actually a project I'll talk a little bit more about later. The projects I'm going to show you and talk about are mostly attempts to address this so what question, and I've essentially done that over and over. It's a little bit embarrassing. I seem to have one idea, but I'm using different media to do it. And really, these are projects that try to make nature visible and show that nature is not out there, that we use nature as resources, we inhabit nature as ecosystems and landscapes. We actually make our lives literally out of nature is the foundation upon which we build our everyday lives in our cities. And so what? Well, we can't do that well, sustainably and equitably, if we can't actually see that we're doing that. And how sustainably and equitably we inhabit this nature has really serious, substantial consequences for how we live together in our places. Okay, so I am going to start with the LA Urban Rangers, but before I do that, I'm going to beg your patience. Before I get to the projects, I actually want to take about 5 minutes and do a sidebar on why I think Los Angeles is oh, how I miss it, is a particularly good place to address this so what question. I actually think it's a fantastic place. I've never found a better place to address these questions. It is so unsustainable and so inequitable. It really takes these problems to extremes. And lo and behold, Los Angeles historically has had this incredible talent for making nature invisible and for the inequitable use of nature, including a tendency to privatize public spaces, including public park space, which is not too abundant to begin with. So I think that Los Angeles really gives us a kind of extreme case. You can really see a place where we've made nature invisible and the consequences of making nature invisible. And within Los Angeles, I've focused in particular on two places which I think are sort of the extreme cases within the extreme case study, and that is the Los Angeles River, this beautiful river. It's actually one of my favorite places, and the Malibu beaches. And so I'm going to do like a 1-minute history of each just to give you some context for the projects and why I've chosen these places. So the Los Angeles River, Eunice, you've seen the Los Angeles River. Can you tell me where it is? Or where you've seen it? Oh, that's right, you're LA. You were the wrong person to ask. Eunice can actually answer that question. Everybody's seen it in the movies. Even if you haven't been in LA. I guarantee you everybody in this room has seen the Los Angeles River. That's Greece. I don't think I have to identify that one. So the LA River is, in fact, Los Angeles' main river. It runs 51 miles through the heart of the Los Angeles area. Has anybody who here has actually seen it? Knows where it is? No, all the hands go down, okay. LA was founded on the river. It's actually one of the best water sources in all of Southern California, which is why LA is where it is. And it is and remains the central artery of the major watershed that Los Angeles inhabits. It is arguably the most important natural fact in Los Angeles, certainly one of them. And nobody seems to know where it is. There are people in LA who literally drive over the LA River 5 days a week, and they cannot tell you where the LA River is. And that's because, there's the LA River. In the 1940s and 50s, I think I missed a slide here. There we go. In the 1940s and 50s, the Army Corps, in their great wisdom, the Army Corps of Engineers, the feds, who I think it was probably good, they were on furlough for a few weeks, decided to transform the river into essentially a concrete storm sewer, 51 mile, the 20 to 30 foot deep, 3-sided concrete sewer in order to control the river floods. This is an extraordinary act of disappearing nature. I think it's not only one of the great magic acts of disappearing nature in Los Angeles, but in all of American history. This is an enormous space. There are parts of it that are as wide as a football field, and it is 51 miles. It goes through the heart of LA, and it is invisible. It's really kind of extraordinary. So we created this, and also this concrete, that's actually my family. Other people's families get to go to Disneyland when they visit. Mine gets to the LA River family tour. And it's kind of ironic, even though it's invisible, it's sort of the most famous forgotten river in America, and it's sort of an icon for everything gone wrong in Los Angeles that we paved our river. And in fact, it has actually really huge consequences for what Los Angeles is like. It is deeply implicated in most of the really notorious ways in which LA is unsustainable and inequitable. Our pollution, lack of public space, the inequitable distribution of public and green space. And I don't have time to go into how that all works, but this is why there are now massive, big civic revitalization projects, and these are considered one of the biggest things going on in Los Angeles to really re-envision Los Angeles in the future as a more sustainable and equitable city. And in order to do that, we're going to require, making the LA River visible again. Okay, so that's the LA River. The Malibu beaches, but we probably walked there. This is a famous Richard Meyer house, actually. 1 minute on the LA beaches. LA is incredibly dysfunctional with park space, with public space. There isn't enough of it. There's an enormously inequitable distribution of it. I don't know what that means in my notes, but obviously, the affluent neighborhoods have far more of it. It's difficult to get to what we do have, and much of it is treated as private space. The beach is something of an exception. It is the most beloved public space, one of the really true public spaces in Southern California. And there is no such thing as an all-private beach in California because of the way the laws work there on coastal access. And yet, in the affluent community of Malibu, there are 20 miles of beaches, public beaches, that are walled off by private development. It is a quarter of the beachfront in LA County, so it's very, very significant. And it is, in fact, the Malibu beaches are an icon internationally for the usurpation by the wealthy of public space that belongs to everybody. Really, you work on the public beaches in Malibu, you will eventually find yourself in the newspapers in London and on German public radio and all these things. These beaches are very, very, very hard to find and to use. The access ways are very few. They're very hard to find. That hedge actually covers about half of this access way. And there are hundreds of illegal signs claiming that these places are private. So the LA River, I think, why have I chosen these two places? The LA River is a really dramatic case of the erasure of nature, actually also public space, but the erasure of nature, and I think Malibu beaches are really a dramatic case of the erasure of public space, and in both the consequences, I think, are quite dramatic. So that's my 5-minute, I hope it was just, I think it was, 5-minute sidebar. And I did start writing about these two places because I was going to be a writer. I still am a writer. I just different kind. And I started writing about this sort of, so what if we make nature invisible? And then I accidentally started literally doing tours of the river. It just started out by showing friends what I was writing about, and it eventually turned into regular tours, thousands of them, I think. Because I found through the tours that there's really no more effective way of making a place visible than taking people to the place and saying, there it is. It's really kind of extraordinary. It's so much more effective than just when I give talks about the river. And then in 2004, I accidentally or inadvertently co-founded a public art collective, literally, called the Los Angeles Urban Rangers. This was actually the idea of Emily Scott, my friend Emily, who's on the right there, Ranger Emily. And we did it for an art show in LA, on LA and Environment. She had this idea. And we did campfire programs for the art show on things like toxic landscapes. And what we do is we use the, I think I got my slides mixed up. We use the park ranger persona. So we sort of deploy it and we adopt it in order to explore places, and especially the places where people live, the places we tend to take for granted. So we're trying to take all that wonder and curiosity that people take out to the national parks, Yosemite, Yellowstone, where my mom and I just went this summer, and we take all that wonder and curiosity to ask places questions about the places that people take for granted, and particularly want to give other people the tools to do that. So that's what we're all about. We thought it was going to be a one-off project just for this show. But then we started, well, first of all, people would come up to us and they say, so do you work for the county? We're like, maybe, maybe not. And then we got invitations. We're like, well, we don't really exist. But then we started taking invitations. So we eventually became a real group. And we have done projects on Hollywood Boulevard. I think this one was called One Step After Another, on the social behavior, mostly on Hollywood Boulevard. We did a project on the LA County Fair that mostly focused on all the connections to the places outside the fair that make the fair work. There's Ranger Emily on our guided hike, a very key stop on our guided hike, the porta potty. We had a project on the interstate system in Los Angeles, the highway system. There's Ranger Emily using our toolkit that we developed with all kinds of tools for measuring and looking at this landscape that is normally sort of invisible to people. It's one of our tools. And I didn't know it at the time. I sort of found out later. I was like, why do we call this an art collective? I don't get it. A couple of the other people in the group were actually from the art world. But this was actually one group in an explosion of art collectives that has happened in the last 5 to 10 years. Some of you probably know about this. that are participatory, require audience participation, they're active, they're on the ground, and they engage social and political and environmental issues. People are arguing about a term at this point. Most people call it social practice. Some people call it critical aesthetics. That's really explanatory, right? And I actually just call them art actions. So I don't think we found the term yet. Eventually, we would take our hats to the Ellie River and the Malibu beaches, which was kind of inevitable, both because how important those places are and because I already had a foundation. Our projects are very rooted in research, and I already had that foundation. So what I want to do is look at these two projects, and in order to explain sort of mechanics of the Rangers, how it works, so how the Rangers in particular put the environmental humanities into action to do this analysis, but then to communicate this analysis and actually try to change what's happening on the ground, which I think is what can sort of be the special powers generally of these social practices, these art practices. So the Ellie River Ramble. This is actually, our Ellie River Ramble was a one-evening event. It was actually part of a series of 3 events that we did as resident artists for MoCA, the Museum of Contemporary Art in LA. Here was our first event on, if any of you know LA, Bunker Hill. This is our Corporate Peaks and Meadows hike, which we did to look at the history of redevelopment in the financial district in Los Angeles. And for our Ellie River Ramble, we actually had a hike that was self-guided where you went from the museum through a part of it downtown LA that's actually the Arts District to our backcountry Riverside Ranger Station. This is actually next to the river, even though you can't see the river because of, what does it say, the undergrowth of infrastructure, regulation, and forgetting. And it's normally completely deserted at night. It's very grim. So here's our backcountry ranger station, and you had to get a permit, a backcountry permit. We had about 800 people. We basically had a big party that night. You had to sign the City of LA waiver as well, which they made us have everyone sign, which basically says, I understand that I can die at any time if I enter this extraordinarily dangerous space. And then you had to sign our backcountry permit. We even made the author of the city permit sign this permit in order to go down. She's actually a good friend. And our backcountry permit said, I understand that I'm entering a major public space and that sort of thing. And then you could do one of 2 hikes. You could either go over the river, or you could do this one, which was actually into the river. Back at the ranger station, we had all kinds of activities. This is our Ask a Ranger table with Ranger Joe. And then with our map, we also renamed a lot of the things that are right next to the river. So actually Verstkuke, which we call Verstkush, became Verstkuke am Fluss. So this is for one night. People could see the river. They could know where it is. We made the river visible. There's Ranger Ron. And they could experience the river as a river and as public space, which it hasn't been regularly experienced as a river or as public space for many decades. We didn't tell them, like I do on my tours when I'm more lecturing, we didn't say, there's the river, look, it's really there and it's really important. We didn't do any of that. We just basically, what this project does is create an alternative universe in which the river just is a river and it is public space. And I think that's what a lot of these social practice projects do. So how did we create this experiential night or project? What's the method to our madness as the LA Urban Rangers? Well, we use the park ranger character. That's our thing, right? That's our method. We take the character, a very familiar character to most Americans, not all, but most, who is immediately know that is an expert on nature, and that is the guardian of America's great public spaces. So once you see the hat, you immediately associate the ranger with nature, with public space. And so we're essentially using the familiar conventions and trappings of the ranger character, the uniform, the language, the kinds of programs, to tell a new story about nature and public space in Los Angeles, a kind of story that people can inhabit, actually. for a while. And I should say that it is a new story, but it is a story that at the same time kind of highlights what the old story is, because the ranger is clearly out of place. There's a disjunction, so there's an irony there that also sort of says, this isn't normally a river in public space, but tonight it's this, a river in public space. The rangers are at once ironic and sincere, which I'm not going to really talk about that much, but I'd be happy to talk about it in questions. So essentially, this project, we're creating this experiential project where we're showing the consequences of making nature invisible, and we are making nature visible at the same time. And in general, we have found that the urban ranger is a particularly good character for imagining nature back into the city. Because people see the ranger and they immediately think, oh, you're going to talk about nature. And imagining the city as a place of nature. And a lot of our projects have emphasized that, not all of them. It's also a great character for challenging the privatization of park space and public space. Because again, we're all about public space. And that's what we did with our Malibu Public Beaches project. So you put the park ranger on the beach in Malibu, and people immediately say, oh, that's public land, right? So these beaches that have often been called, oh, they're private, but you can walk on them. We didn't do that. We just sort of totally flipped the semantics and said, come on down to the public beaches. We're going to hang out on the public. Oh, yeah, there's some lands over there that are private, but we're not going to worry about those. We're going to show you how to stay off of them. Let's enjoy the public beaches. So here's how we put the ranger character to work on the public beaches. We created a guide. This is actually part of our Public Access 101 series. The Downtown series was the next installment of that. We had all the information you need to use as the beaches. This is actually a taxonomy of signage. And then we had safaris, our Malibu Public Beach safaris, where we actually took people to the beaches. Each safari, we went to 2 beaches. We had skills-enhancing activities for how to find and use a beach. A public beach in Malibu, which you actually need. We had an access way hunt, just try to find that one. We had sign watching activity. We had a public easement potluck in front of this other beautiful Richard Meyer house, mansion, I should say. We call it the Art Museum. We had a campfire song. And we had our central activity, trailblazing the public-private boundary, where essentially we gave people trailblazing kits, and it had everything you need to use maps to find these completely unmarked easements on the dry sand that no one knows about. You can use a wet sand on any beach in California, but a lot of people don't know you can actually use a lot of the dry sand. You just have to know where. So we had them mark out, actually literally with the tape measure, find their easement, mark it out. They were in groups, and then practice their stereotypical beach activities. Each group had a different activity. So this is actually, the woman in the orange hat's actually the head of public access for the Coastal Commission, sort of performing brilliantly in our sunbathing activity, our yoga. And they had to do a freeze frame so everybody could take a picture. This is our Reading Trashy Magazines group. Okay. So again, I've been writing op-eds about this. I've been actually writing a couple online guides. The Coastal Commission addresses this, State Coastal Commission addresses this issue. Activists have addressed this issue, but what we were really trying to do is give people the tools to actually go to the beaches and use them. And to really experience the public beaches as public. So again, kind of creating an alternative universe in which the beaches are just public. And again, this is our wildlife group, wildlife watching group. We're activating the public beaches as public, but at the same time, the ridiculousness of a lot of what we're doing, actually measuring with a tape measure and doing this stuff, I think also sort of highlights the problems at the same time, sort of, again, irony and sincerity, that there are quite a few problems with privatization down here of these public spaces. So those are the 2 projects that we created as LA Urban Rangers, sort of how they work, the method to our madness, how we're addressing the so what question, trying to make nature visible. And I feel really fortunate to have stumbled into the LA Urban Rangers. It ended up, I had no idea this was going to happen at the time. It ended up really being transformative for me. And to sort of to just sort of accidentally enter this whole kind of exploding new world of these art practices. And for me, it really ended up opening up kind of a whole new world of possibilities. At first I was like, what am I? Am I a writer? But now I just sort of enjoy it and think, well, what's going to happen next? But so it kind of opened up really thinking about lots of other possibilities for ways to communicate these ideas. Hopefully one day other ideas as well. But I'm going to just race through some of these projects so that we can get to questions. This is actually came out of what I developed an interest in what a persona can do as a consequence of being in the Rangers. And so I created another persona, JJ, which is completely different, who writes a fake advice column called Green Me Up, JJ, that I'm experimenting with. And basically here I use the conventions of the green advice column that advises you how to green up your life personally. And I just give totally ridiculous, insane advice I'm actually doing this for Works in Progress in a few weeks, and then I'll actually give you the advice as well, not just the question. But and what I'm trying to do is highlight the problems with contemporary environmentalism, which I think a lot of these problems are actually rooted in this kind of impossible to topple idea of nature as something that's out there and that's not part of us. One of which, one problem is, I think, the misguided emphasis on individual action. There are limits to the Ranger persona. One of them is that you always have to be friendly, and you cannot be sarcastic. This has advantages. It actually proves to be enormously effective for addressing a really contentious issue that's been characterized by conflict, like the Malibu beaches. It was enormously helpful to never yell back at people. You know, we were just always totally friendly, and that actually ended up being very effective. But at the same time, especially me, I'm the youngest, I have 3 older brothers, I really kind of want to be sarcastic sometimes and just fight. So this also sort of satisfied that desire to stop being so friendly all the time. But then back to a more friendly tone. This is a project I just did this past year. I just finished getting up at Laumeier Sculpture Park in St. Louis, Missouri, sort of in the middle of the country, for those of you who don't know. This could have been an LA Urban Rangers project. It's obviously heavily informed by my work with them. It's my first solo project. It also reminded me how much I prefer, actually, to collaborate on these kinds of projects. But I had actually a great time on this project, and what I've done is essentially use the conventions of nature appreciation, again, just like we do with the Rangers, to redefine and reimagine nature. So get people in a setting where they know, okay, we're going to be talking about nature, and then just talk about it completely differently. So I'm using this park, which is sort of seen as this timeless natural landscape. And again, I don't say, we have to redefine nature. Nature isn't what you think. It's more, again, sort of this alternative universe approach where I just very matter-of-factly treat nature as something very different without remarking on what I'm doing. So I have 15 stops, 15 signs. Some of them talk about, and these are all about the fact, they basically talk about all the factors that shape and create this landscape, not just ecological and geological factors, including the use of resources that flow in and out of the park. This one is really about history. Nature is something that has a history. It's not timeless. This is in the middle of the forest. And then a number of them are really about social geography and the ways in which the social geography in the landscape, in which class relationships that are imprinted in the landscape really shape your experience of one place or another, and who has that experience. I have a number of them address that. So this is actually probably my most recent project. I really, really enjoyed this one. It was really fun, and I would love to replicate it somewhere, like Central Park or something. The English Garden. This is a new collective. I wanted to try a collective that wasn't the LA Urban Rangers, and more than that, and also that wasn't persona-based, and more than that, I really wanted to do a collective that just focused on the LA River. This collective is actually, the majority of it is university professors who are playing with me. And in fact, our project is called Play the LA River, and it also comes out of my frustration with sort of reimagining the LA River one night at a time, or with my tours 20 to 50 people at a time. Just didn't seem like it was happening. So we're actually creating a card deck of 52 sites. The LA River is 51 miles long, with 4 suits. I shouldn't even be showing you this. This is obviously a very, very early mock-up that's mostly not filled in. And the project will take place over the course of 51 weeks, and we will invite people to come play whenever they want, or with more scheduled events at these 52 sites. Play, sing, dance, eat, juggle, bowl, whatever, skip rope, dance, in any way they want to over the course of 51 weeks. Anybody want to help us? This project's growing really, really big. We can use all the help we can get. Just let me know. And this is really an effort to do a kind of massive act of reimagination on the river and to reimagine it as public space on a really, really big scale over a long period of time. So we'll see. I can report back in a year and a half on how that's worked. And then finally, this is the last one I'll talk about, and I'm showing this partly for Christophe. I decided to go for an offer I had from this app company called Escape Apps to address the Malibu Beach issue with an iPhone app. Actually, it's very ironic. I hate cell phones, like with every fiber in my body. But I've actually been very pleased with what this technology can do. There is an extraordinary amount of knowledge that you need to know in order to actually be able to find and use these beaches. It's really kind of crazy. And this turns out to be a format and a medium where you can cram that extraordinary amount of knowledge into a very small little object that people can take with them. That's very accessible, not to all, but it's actually widely accessible to Angelenos. It has turned out to be both very practical as a tool for getting people to the Malibu beaches. A lot of people are using it. And also as a political tool to kind of advance the issue, both by putting the public on the public beaches, which is probably the most effective way to change our general conception of whether these beaches are public and private. So both that way and then sort of actively advocating for change. The PR, again, you do something on this issue, international, you get international PR, and that's been, I think, very, very helpful for showcasing this issue. These are some of the emails out of the many hundreds that people have sent from the app to the public agencies, asking them to take care of problems. This project has been tremendously fun. It's also a sort of be careful what you wish for project. You don't necessarily want to go up against people who have more money than God. So far, it hasn't been too bad. Okay, so all of these projects involve some kind of writing, but they've also made me, I've mostly focused on them in the last couple of years, they've made me really anxious to get back to writing in a more concentrated way, and so I am doing a new project, which I think you'll actually, Nicole has a project that's so similar in so many ways in terms of the ideas we're looking at, so be really looking forward to that next week, but mine's called Stop Saving the Planet, and it's a critique of contemporary American environmentalism. I think, though, at this point, there's no turning back. Even though I'm doing that project, I will definitely look for ways to communicate these ideas with other media formats, both the ones I've used and hopefully some new ones. I just want to end with, these people are so thrilled that we're making public space visible in Malibu. These are actually Coastal Commission folks, the head of enforcement and the head of public access, who have been very, very supportive of the app. And here are my nephews who are so thrilled that we're making LA River visible when I dragged them along on my tour that day. So thank you.